AITA for breaking up with my girlfriend on her birthday? My name is Everest, and even now, thinking about it makes my chest ache in that quiet, heavy way that sits right between regret and relief. I'm 19 now, but this happened last year, during those last few months of high school, when every small thing felt like it could change your whole life. Her name was Elaine. We met through my friend Keanu, who sat next to her in art class. I remember him mentioning her once, how quiet she was, how she always drew in the back of the room instead of talking to anyone. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a few days later, I got a message from her on Facebook. It was short, polite, something like, "Hi, I'm Elaine. I think we've met once before." We hadn't. I remember staring at her message, trying to figure out if it was some kind of joke. The way she typed, it was perfect. Every period, every capital letter. No emojis, no slang, no hesitation. It felt more like a message you'd get from a teacher than a girl your age. Still, I replied, out of curiosity more than anything. We talked a little that night, nothing personal, just about school, art, and music. She told me she liked the sound of thunderstorms, but hated when people talked too loudly. When I joked that she sounded like she lived inside a poem, she didn't even react, just sent a small maybe. That was the thing about Elaine. She was all quiet replies and half smiles. When we finally met in person, it was at a small cafe near school. I got there early, and I remember feeling weirdly nervous. She walked in 5 minutes late, clutching her sketchbook like it was some kind of shield. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. We sat there for almost an hour. Most of the time, neither of us spoke. I asked questions, she gave short answers. I made a few jokes that barely got a reaction. And yet, for some reason, I didn't feel annoyed. There was something strangely peaceful about her silence. Over the next few weeks, we talked more online. She opened up a little about her drawings, her love for old movies, and how she collected postcards from cities she'd never been to. I told her about my plans for college, my part-time job, the usual things. She never said much in return, but she listened. She always listened. Eventually, I started calling her at night. She never called first, but she always picked up. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk much. We'd just sit there, both doing our own thing, the sound of her pencil scratching paper filling the silence. It became comforting. After a while, I realized I liked her. I don't even know when it happened, but one night, she laughed at something dumb I said, and it just hit me. This quiet, nervous girl had found her way under my skin. When I told her I liked her, she didn't say anything for almost a minute. Then she whispered, "I think I like you too, but I don't really know how to do this." I told her it was okay. We could take it slow, and we did. Maybe too slow. Elaine didn't like hugs. She said they made her uncomfortable. She didn't like holding hands or sitting too close. She flinched the first time I tried to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. I told her I didn't mind, but deep down, I wanted to feel something, some sign that she wanted me close, even if just a little. I made her a playlist once, songs that reminded me of her. I stayed up half the night picking each one carefully. When I sent it, she replied with one word, "Thanks." That was it. No smiley face. No, I love it. Just thanks. It stung, but I told myself she was trying in her own way. A few weeks later, she surprised me. We were walking home from the park, and it started raining. I offered to walk her to the bus stop, but she shook her head and said she wanted to stay a bit longer. We stood under a tree, laughing at how soaked we were getting. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't perfect. It was awkward and shy, but it was real. That moment stayed with me. It made every silent message and short reply worth it. But after that, something changed. When school started again, things grew distant. We went to the same school, but every time I asked to meet between classes or during lunch, she said she couldn't. She always had a reason. Group project, study session, headache. It got to the point where I stopped asking. So I tested something. I stopped texting first, just to see what would happen. A day passed. Nothing. 2 days. Still nothing. Then, on the third day, she messaged me about some random teacher she didn't like. "No, how are you? No, I miss you." Just small talk. I tried to ignore it, but it ate at me. I felt like I was the only one putting anything into what we had. I tried talking to her about it one night over the phone. Told her I felt like I was the only one trying. She stayed quiet for a long time before saying, "I don't know what to do differently." That broke me a little. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. For a while after that, she started texting more. Little good morning messages, even compliments once or twice. But it didn't feel real. It felt like she was copying something she'd seen online, trying to act the way she thought she was supposed to. One evening, I told Keanu I didn't know what to do. He said maybe Elaine just wasn't ready to love someone yet. Maybe she was still figuring herself out. I knew he was right, but I also knew I couldn't keep giving without getting anything back. The next week, we had a small fight, not a loud one, but one of those quiet arguments that linger long after they're over. I asked why she didn't tell me things, why she always kept me at a distance. She said, "Because when people know too much, they leave." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. After that, we barely talked for a few days. Every time I saw her at school, she looked away first. Then, on a Friday afternoon, she texted, "Can we meet after school?" I said yes. When I got there, she was standing by the old oak tree near the parking lot, wearing a light blue jacket, the one I'd once said looked good on her. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. We talked for a bit. It was small talk at first, but I could feel the heaviness in the air. Finally, I said it. Elaine, I think we should stop seeing each other. Her lips trembled slightly. She didn't cry, not right away. She just whispered, "You're really doing this today?" I frowned. "Why? What's today?" She looked down at the ground, voice shaking. "My birthday." My stomach dropped. I swear I felt all the air leave my body. I hadn't known. I hadn't even checked. I stood there frozen, trying to take it back, but it was too late. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know." She nodded, but her voice was barely a whisper. "It's okay. I get it." But she didn't, and I could see that in her eyes. When I got home that night, I saw her name pop up on Messenger. It was one short message. "I know you didn't mean to, but I wish you'd waited one more day." I stared at it for a long time. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. In the end, I said nothing. For weeks after, everything reminded me of her. The rain, her sketches, even the quiet spaces between songs. I saw her at school sometimes, walking with her head down, earbuds in. We never spoke. It's been 3 months since everything ended between Elaine and me. 3 months since that strange, quiet goodbye beneath the oak tree. The day I broke her heart without even realizing it was her birthday. For a while, I thought she'd completely disappeared. No texts, no messages, no posts. Her social media had gone still, like she'd chosen to erase herself from my world entirely. And maybe that was fair. Maybe that's what she needed. But last weekend, when I was halfway through writing an essay for college applications, I saw her name pop up on Messenger again. "Hey, do you still have that USB drive I gave you? The one with my drawings?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I hadn't thought about that drive in months. It was tucked inside my desk drawer, still labeled with her neat handwriting. Sketches 2023. I told her yes, I had it. She replied almost immediately. "Could you drop it off sometime this weekend? I just need a few things from it." I said sure, and then I just sat there, staring at the screen, my chest heavy in a way I hadn't felt in months. That Saturday afternoon, I drove to her house. The neighborhood felt smaller than I remembered. The same cracked sidewalks, the same half-tilted mailbox that leaned like it had given up trying to stand straight. Elaine was sitting on the porch steps when I arrived. Her brother Keanu was there too, leaning against the railing with his phone in hand. When he saw me pull up, he gave me a polite nod. Not cold, not friendly, just guarded. Elaine looked different. Her hair was shorter now, dyed a darker shade that made her eyes look almost storm gray. She wasn't wearing her usual oversized sweaters or that light blue jacket I used to love. Instead, she wore a plain white t-shirt and jeans, simple but confident. There was something about her posture, straighter, stronger, that made me realize she wasn't the same girl I used to know. When Keanu went inside, I walked up the steps and handed her the USB drive. "Thanks," she said softly. Her voice was steady, but there was something unreadable behind it. We stood there for a while, neither of us sure what to say. Eventually, she gestured to the porch steps, and I sat beside her. At first, it was small talk, school, college plans, how quiet everything had felt since graduation. She told me she'd gotten into a small art program a few towns over. I congratulated her, and she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Then, after a pause, she said, "You look tired." I laughed under my breath. College prep will do that. But she didn't laugh. She just studied me for a moment and said quietly, "You haven't changed much. You still try to hide behind jokes when things get heavy." That hit harder than I expected. Before I could respond, she looked down at her hands and asked, "Did you ever really love me?" The question came so suddenly that I almost forgot how to breathe. It wasn't angry. It was calm, like she was asking about the weather, but the weight of it pressed down hard. I told her yes. I told her that I tried, that I really did care, but maybe we were just too different, that sometimes love doesn't look the same to both people. She nodded slowly. "You wanted someone who needed you," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I wanted someone who'd let me breathe." Her words hung in the air like rain waiting to fall. I didn't know what to say, because she was right. I did want to be needed, to feel like I was helping her, saving her somehow. Maybe I mistook her quiet for fragility, her distance for something I needed to fix. We sat there in silence for a while. The sound of a lawnmower hummed faintly down the street. A few leaves skittered across the porch floor. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted. "Not because you broke up with me, but because you did it on that day. My birthday. I thought it meant I didn't matter at all to you." I felt a familiar guilt crawl up my throat. "I swear, I didn't know." "I know," she interrupted gently. "You didn't mean to, but it still hurt." Her voice didn't tremble this time. There was no bitterness, no sadness, just truth that somehow made it harder to hear. She sighed and leaned back slightly, looking at the sky. "You know what's weird? I think I'm grateful for it now, for all of it." That caught me off guard. "Grateful?" "Yeah," she said. "You breaking up with me made me realize how much of myself I was hiding just to make other people comfortable. I kept trying to be the version of me that wouldn't scare anyone off. But after you left, I stopped doing that." She turned to look at me, and for the first time, her gaze didn't waver. I started started therapy. I got help. I learned that it's okay to not be easy to love, as long as I'm honest. There was a long pause after that. Then she added quietly, I'm glad you ended it when you did. I think I learned more from that than I ever did from being with you. The words stung, but not in a cruel way. They felt like closure wrapped in honesty. I nodded. I'm glad you're doing better. She smiled then, small, soft, and real. Me too. As I stood to leave, she stopped me. Wait, she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out the same USB drive I had just given her and handed it back. I thought you needed this, I said, confused. I copied what I wanted, she replied. You can keep those drawings. Maybe they'll remind you that not everything broken was a mistake. I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded and thanked her. As I turned to walk back to my car, she called out softly, Everest. I turned. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. Don't carry guilt for too long, she said. It turns into something heavier than love. Then she smiled, that same small, knowing smile, and went back inside. When I got home, I plugged in the USB drive. At first, there was nothing, just a single folder named Still Here. Inside, only one image. It was a sketch of a boy standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over a girl who was walking away. The caption at the bottom said, sometimes love isn't meant to stay. Sometimes it just shows up to teach you something. I stared at that drawing for a long time, longer than I care to admit. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a message, a final piece of her heart, left quietly for me to find. That night, I didn't text her. I didn't call. There wasn't anything left to say. The end. You're not the AITA, Everest. What happened wasn't cruelty. It was just life doing its complicated thing. You didn't break her on purpose. You were just a kid trying to figure out what love actually means when it stops feeling easy. Ending things on her birthday was awful timing, sure, but you didn't know. That wasn't heartless, just unlucky. You handled everything with more care than most people would have at 19. You tried, you listened, you showed up. You weren't perfect, but you were genuine. Elaine wasn't ready to be close, and you weren't wrong for wanting a little more connection. That's not being selfish, that's being human. Sometimes people fit for a while, and then they don't, and no one's the villain in that story. You both learned something from it, and that matters more than who hurt who. The whole thing reads like one of those quiet lessons that only makes sense after the ending. You didn't leave out of anger. You left because staying would have just kept both of you stuck. And the fact that you still care about how it ended says everything. People who don't care don't feel that kind of guilt. So yeah, not the AITA, just someone who tried to love honestly, messed up a little, but grew from it anyway. Life's weird like that. Sometimes the ending teaches you more than the beginning ever could. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments. AITA for stopping cooking for my partner after constant criticism. My name is Gia, and this all started about 6 months ago. I live with my partner, Luca. We've been together for 3 years, and for most of that time, I've enjoyed cooking for both of us. It was my way of showing care, a little ritual that gave me satisfaction, a way to feel like I was giving something tangible to someone I love. Luca was never exactly a picky eater, but he has strong opinions about food. It started small, comments about how he liked his pasta cooked a little softer, or how the salad needed more of this, less of that. At first, I shrugged it off. I thought he was just expressing preferences, and I tried to accommodate him. I even laughed sometimes when he would analyze my sauces, joking about how precise he was, and I felt like it was harmless. Over time, though, it became constant. Every single meal came with feedback. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, even snacks. I'd make pancakes, and he'd comment that the batter was too thick. I'd bake muffins, and he'd suggest a different ratio of sugar to flour. I wasn't sure when it shifted from helpful advice to critique, but the difference was subtle, almost invisible at first. It wasn't said aggressively, not in a mean way, but the frequency was exhausting. Every time I entered the kitchen, a knot formed in my stomach. I started dreading meals, imagining the comments before I even finished cooking. I tried talking to him once. I said, Luca, I love cooking for you, but constant critique makes it hard to enjoy it. He nodded and promised to be more mindful. And for a week, it improved. I even allowed myself to smile in the kitchen, humming quietly while I chopped vegetables. But soon, the comments returned, sharper but still polite. They came in small doses, but enough to make me second-guess every ingredient, every measurement, every timing. I started checking my knives, my pans, even my seasoning over and over. Cooking became exhausting. Last week, I decided to make a homemade stir-fry with fresh vegetables and chicken. I carefully cut the ingredients, measured the sauces, and cooked slowly, trying to enjoy the process. I even took a moment to sprinkle sesame seeds on top, feeling proud of the color and texture I had managed. Luca took a bite and and said, "Good, but the onions are too big. Maybe slice them thinner next time." I froze. My hands shook. I felt my chest tighten, a wave of heat rushing from my stomach to my face. I realized I couldn't do it anymore. Not today, not ever if this pattern continued. All the small, invisible pressures had piled up until the moment broke me. I said, "You know what? From now on, I'm not cooking. If you want meals, you can make them yourself." I meant it calmly, but I felt the heat rise in my chest, my hands trembling slightly. I walked out of the kitchen and didn't return until it was time to eat. That night, Lucas said I was being passive-aggressive and childish. I told him no. I explained that I had reached my limit. Cooking had stopped being joyful. It had become a source of stress and tension, a task performed under a microscope that never allowed for mistakes. For the next few days, I didn't cook. Luca ate sandwiches, cereal, or ordered food. He grew frustrated. He messaged me a long text. "I don't understand. You've always liked cooking. Why are you punishing me?" I replied, "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. I can't enjoy cooking when it feels like I'm under a microscope every time I enter the kitchen." He didn't answer for a while. The apartment was quiet. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I could reclaim my space and emotions. Sadness because I'd never imagined it would come to this. I began noticing the small ways the tension stretched through our home. The way Luca would stand in the kitchen silently, stirring takeout in the microwave, avoiding eye contact. The way I would eat alone at my desk, nervously glancing toward him as if waiting for some critique to strike me from across the room. I started preparing my own meals separately, enjoying them quietly at my desk while Luca fussed over his takeout. It felt strange at first, like a subtle division forming between us. I even started labeling my containers in the fridge so that no mix-up could happen, marking clearly which items were mine. Every meal became a private ritual. I realized I was shrinking my world into one small corner of the apartment just to avoid his criticism. Then one evening, Luca tried to engage me, a little too forcefully. He came into my room, holding a container of soup, and said, "Gia, I tried to make this. You need to taste it and tell me if it's right. I want you to guide me." I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was exhaustion, frustration, and grief all mixed together. I wanted him to learn, yes, but I also didn't want to be the person who evaluated every bite. I looked at him and whispered, "I don't want to do this anymore, Luca. I'm tired. Every meal feels like a test I'm failing." He stared at me for a long time, like he was seeing me for the first time in months. His shoulders slumped and he muttered, "I didn't realize it was that bad. I thought I was just helping." I shook my head, tears brimming. "Helping? No, you're not helping. You're judging. And every time you do, I feel smaller. Cooking used to be my joy. Now it's my battleground." He didn't respond immediately. He walked back to the kitchen, slamming a cabinet door just a little too hard. Later that night, he sent me a long message over Messenger. "I didn't know you felt this way. I just thought I was giving advice. I never wanted to make you feel like this. But now I see, maybe I have been too harsh." I read it and didn't respond. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to list every tiny criticism he had made over months, to demand he understand. Part of me wanted to crumble and say, "I just wanted to be okay again." But instead, I stayed quiet. I let the apartment breathe in silence with me. The next morning, Luca left for work without a word. I ate a small breakfast, feeling empty. By noon, I got a message. "I tried making lunch. It wasn't great. I feel lost. I don't want this to destroy us, Gia." I stared at the screen, a swirl of emotions building. Relief, sadness, anger, love. I felt like we were on the edge of a cliff together, each message a gust of wind threatening to push us over. It's been a month since I stopped cooking for Luca, and I thought things had settled into a quiet tension. But last week, everything escalated unexpectedly. He had friends over for dinner, something we had done together countless times before. The apartment smelled faintly of garlic and onions, though I hadn't touched a single ingredient. I stayed in my room, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I could hear the chatter, the laughter, and the occasional comment about the food being good, but could use a little more salt, which wasn't coming from me. My chest tightened. I felt a surge of anger I hadn't expected, a mix of resentment, sadness, and the bitter realization that everything I had done for this man, all the time and care I had poured into cooking for him, had been overshadowed by judgment. After everyone left, the apartment was quiet except for the faint clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Luca came into the living room, his voice tight, bordering on pleading. "Gia, this is ridiculous. I feel like I'm being treated like a child. Why can't you just cook like you used to?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, because every time I cook, it stops being about us or about care. It's about critique. I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration written all over his face. "So you're just going to stop? That's it?" "Yes," I said quietly but firmly. "I've tried talking. I've tried explaining. You said you'd change, and nothing changed. I need to protect my own happiness. His eyes dropped to the floor. For a moment, there was silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, in a quiet, almost desperate tone, he said, I just feel like we're falling apart over something that should be simple. I didn't respond because it was true. Something as small as meals, the thing I had loved doing most, had become a battlefield. We both knew it, even if neither of us wanted to admit it out loud. The tension stretched through the apartment, hanging in the air like smoke. Over the next few days, the atmosphere became unbearable. We barely ate together, barely spoke beyond logistics, and every glance felt loaded with judgment or accusation. The apartment felt like a cage. One night, I tried to start a conversation, just a casual, how was your day? And he snapped almost immediately, why do you even care? You've made it clear you don't want to share anything with me anymore. His words cut deeper than I expected. I flinched, feeling the distance between us widen. Then came the text that changed everything. I signed up for a cooking class next week. I want to understand, not to criticize. I don't want this to break us. I stared at my phone, my heart racing, part relief, part skepticism. I typed slowly, I'll see. I can't promise anything, but I appreciate that you're trying. The week leading up to the class was filled with awkward energy. Every shared glance felt like a challenge. I noticed how he lingered near the kitchen when I was preparing my own meals, as if trying to gauge whether I was judging him silently or silently resenting him. I caught him staring at the stove when he thought I wasn't looking, and I realized I was doing the same with him, noticing every little movement, every small mistake, waiting for the old criticism to appear. When the day of the class finally arrived, I was nervous. Luca looked tense, jittery, almost like a student about to fail a test. The instructor paired us together. We were side by side, knives in hand, chopping vegetables. Luca struggled, spilling sauce on the counter, burning a small batch of bread. I had to bite back a sigh, but instead of snapping, I coached him gently. I reminded him of small techniques, praised the moments he did right. For a moment, it felt almost like old times, not perfect, but real. Then came a moment I didn't expect. Luca accidentally dropped a bowl, and the contents spilled across the counter. He froze, shame written all over his face, and I felt an instinctive irritation rising. Luca, come on, just clean it up, I said, voice sharper than intended. He looked up at me, eyes flashing, and said, see, even here, you can't help but get frustrated with me. I thought this was supposed to be different. The room seemed to shrink around us. I felt my chest tighten. I'm not frustrated. I'm tired, I snapped. I'm tired of everything being a judgment of me or you or us. This class is supposed to be a start, Luca, not a continuation of the same argument. He stared at me in silence, and for a moment, the tension was unbearable. I wanted to walk away, but then I noticed the small tremble in his hands, the quiet shame in his eyes. Something softened inside me. Okay, I said quietly, taking a deep breath. Let's just start over. Right now, forget the past. We went slowly, side by side, working through the recipes, laughing at mistakes, spilling sauce, dropping vegetables, burning a little pasta. And in those moments, the apartment felt lighter somehow. Luca laughed nervously at himself, and I found myself laughing too, a real laugh that hadn't come in weeks. We talked more than we had in days, about the recipes, the smells, the textures, and for the first time in a month, I felt like we were on the same side again. By the end of the class, we didn't solve everything. The apartment waiting at home was still filled with tension. Our issues hadn't vanished, but we had reminded ourselves, if only for a few hours, why we had chosen each other in the first place. On the ride home, Luca reached for my hand. I hesitated, then took it. We didn't speak much, but it wasn't silent. It was tentative, careful, fragile. Back at the apartment, he suggested making dinner together, something simple. I agreed. We cooked side by side, clumsily, quietly, but together. The end. You're not the AITA Gia. You didn't do anything wrong. You just hit a point where something that used to make you happy started to feel like pressure. Cooking for someone you love is supposed to feel warm, not like a test you can fail. You weren't punishing Luca. You were protecting your peace. He might not have meant to make you feel criticized, but that doesn't mean it didn't sting after a while. You tried to talk about it. You gave him chances, and when nothing changed, you stepped back instead of blowing up. That's mature. Sometimes people don't realize how their little comments pile up until the other person finally says enough. And honestly, taking a break from cooking doesn't make you cold or dramatic. It just means you stop pouring energy into something that stopped feeling good. Luca learning to cook afterward kind of proves your point. He finally saw what it takes and why his nitpicking hurt. Maybe now he understands that love isn't about giving notes. It's about giving thanks. So no, you're not the AITA. You just needed some space to breathe, and that's completely fair. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for not wanting kids because of my illness. Click here to watch it now.